Welcome to Virtual Kala Series, a virtual fundraiser to help the families in need during these tough times, in association with Insta Paint Social. So extend your help.
Our next artist is Pragya Bhatt, who is going to share some stories, verses, and poems on rain.
Hi everybody, my name is Pragya Bhatt and I'm performing under the literature category for the Virtual Kala series. The Virtual Kala series is doing great work by raising funds to provide necessities to those in need in collaboration with Insta Paint Social. Please do contribute as per your wish for the cause. And let us now begin with the program. So this is actually my second performance for this program. And I'm doing a second performance because I truly believe in what we're doing, and I do believe in the power of art to be able to change the world, to be able to change us. If you saw, if you saw my previous performance, you do know a little bit about myself, about me, but I'd really like to let all the new joinees, all the new viewers, to let them know a little bit about who I am and the work I do. I'm actually an international yoga teacher, and I'm based in Bangalore. I'm the author of a book called Beyond Asanas, which I wanted to share with you. It has been published by Penguin in 2019, and in it I discuss yoga and the stories behind yoga, the mythology behind yoga. And I used to work as a software engineer. I'm actually a software engineer, and that is what I did for a long time, about 8.5 years before I decided to teach yoga. But from the beginning of my life, I've always wanted to write. I've always wanted to be a writer, and for that reason, poetry and prose and literature is something that's very close to my heart. And I'm really glad that I can actually indulge in the thing that I love and actually do it for a good cause. So without further ado, let me begin. I'd like to begin with with where I left off, the previous session, and I really urge you to go and look at those, the previous session, because the poems that I read out that day were, a different mood, a different tone, and today's poems and prose are going to be a little different. But nonetheless, I read out a little verse from Shantaram. Now, the reason I ended with Shantaram, and the reason I want to begin with Shantaram is because I just love that book. It was a book that I read in one sitting. And those of you, who love to read, you know that as readers, sometimes we don't want to reread books because of the magic. Rereading a book sort of like sometimes gets rid of the magic that drew us to the book in the first place. So I've actually only read that book once, but I've read excerpts, many, many times. And so today is an excerpt that I'd like to read to you. The book has a lot of things about Mumbai. It's based in Mumbai, and it has a lot of, it sort of brings Mumbai to life. And before reading the book, I'd never been to Mumbai. So my ideas of Mumbai are really influenced by what Gregory David Roberts has actually said in the book. So let me just start reading the passage. Okay. My mind was still shuffling through those thoughts when I realized that I was in Carla's street. I passed a ground floor apartment. The wide French doors leading directly from the street were open. A desultory breeze riffled the gauze curtains, and I saw a soft yellow light, a candle glowing within. The rain grew heavier, but a restlessness I couldn't fight or understand kept me walking. Vinod's love song, the song that rang bells in the dome of the Gateway Monument, was running on a loop in my mind. So you see like the different references to Bombay. My thoughts floated back to the boat, sailing on the surreal lake that the monsoon had made of the street. And this is a direct reference to the previous passage, so I really do urge you to watch the previous performance as well. The look in Carla's eyes, commanding, demanding, drove the restlessness to a kind of fury in my heart. I had to stop, sometimes in the rain, to draw deep breaths, I was choking with love and desire. There was anger in me and pain. My fists were clenched. The muscles of my arms and chest and back were tight and taut. I thought of the Italian couple, the junkies in Anand's hotel, and I thought of death and dying. The black and brooding sky finally ruptured and cracked. Lightning ripped into the Arabian Sea, and thunder followed with deafening applause. I began to run. The trees were dark, their leaves wet through. They looked like small black clouds themselves, those trees, each one shedding its shower of rain. The streets were empty. I ran through puddles of fast-flowing water reflecting the lightning-fractured sky. All the loneliness and all the love I knew collected and combined in me, until my heart was as swollen with love for her as the clouds above were swollen with their mass of rain. And I ran. And somehow I was back in that street, back at the doorway to her house. And then I stood there, clawed by lightning, my chest heaving with a passion that was still running in me, while my body stood still. She came to the open doors to look at the sky. She was wearing a thin, white, sleeveless nightgown. She saw me standing in the storm. Our eyes met and held. She came through the doors, down 2 steps, and walked toward me. Thunder shook the street and lightning filled her eyes. She came into my arms. We kissed. Our lips made thoughts somehow without words, the kind of thoughts that feelings have. Our tongues writhed and slithered in their caves of pleasure, tongues proclaiming what we were, human, lovers. Lips slid across the kiss, and I submerged her in love, surrendering and submerging in love myself. I lifted her in my arms and carried her into the house, into the room that was perfumed with her. We shed our clothes on the tiled floor, and she led me to her bed. We lay close, but not touching. In the storm-lit darkness, the beaded sweat and raindrops on her arm were like so many glittering stars, and her skin was like a span of night sky. I pressed my lips against the sky and licked the stars into my mouth. She took my body into hers, and every movement was an incantation. Our breathing was like the whole world chanting prayers. Sweat ran in rivulets to ravines of pleasure. Every movement was a satin skin cascade. Within the velvet cloaks of tenderness, our backs convulsed in quivering heat, pushing muscles to complete what minds begin and bodies always win. I was hers, she was mine. My body was her chariot, and she drove it into the sun. Her body was my river, and I became the sea. And the wailing moan that drove our lips together at the end was the world of hope and sorrow, that ecstasy rings from lovers as it floods their souls with bliss. The still and softly breathing silence that suffused and submerged us afterward was emptied of need and want and hunger and pain, and everything else except the pure, ineffable exquisiteness of love. So that's where this one ends, and I think it's a really powerful passage. Just a second, I think I'm going to just okay. Right. So I was just looking for my next poem, but I just think that was a really powerful verse from the book, because it actually, it's actually very Hindi filmy, and Bollywood is where Hindi films originate from, and Bollywood is in Mumbai, and I found this passage to be very Indian, very filmy, and the fact that it was written by a man who had just moved to India and who actually did not even grow up in India, hadn't grown up watching Hindi films, makes it seem that Mumbai has something that, and the Mumbai rains have something that evokes the poet in us. So that's why I really love that passage, and I really urge you to read the book, because it is a book which is amazing, and the fact that it was written, in India about an Indian city which is so legendary, and especially if you live in Bombay, it's just a book that really comes to life, and it's beautiful. Similar to this passage, it's just very beautiful. All right. So my next verse actually is by William Shakespeare, and of course he needs no introduction. All of us have read something by him. I fell in love with Shakespeare when I was a child because I used to read. Actually, I used to read a lot, and I used to read a lot of his plays. The complete and unabridged versions, and I used to really like the way he has a knack for making something which is very commonplace. He makes it interesting. So that's something that we'll see in the sonnet that I've chosen for today. To a lot of us, Shakespeare can be very intimidating because we feel that we won't understand what he's saying. We feel that he's very difficult to understand. But to so many more of us, he speaks to our souls. There's so many speeches that he's written. There's so many poems that he's written that really speak to a lot of us and are almost like a guiding light for many of us. So. Let's just dive into the poem. And actually I've chosen a sonnet, and it's sonnet number 34, and it goes: Why didst thou promise such a beauteous day, and make me travel forth without my cloak, to let base clouds overtake me in my way, hiding the bravery in their rotten smoke? 'Tis not enough that through the cloud thou break, to dry the rain on my storm-beaten face. For no man well of such a salve can speak, that heals the wound and cures not the disgrace. Nor can thy shame give physic to my grief. Though thou repent, yet I have still the loss. The offender's sorrow lends but weak relief to him that bears the strong offense's cross. Ah, but those tears are pearl which thy love sheds, and they are rich and ransom all ill deeds. So why I love Shakespeare? I love the fact that he takes, like I said before, he takes seemingly everyday things, everyday phenomena, everyday people, everyday occurrences, and infuses a deeper meaning into them. So in this particular sonnet, you see that the poet is initially disappointed because he was expecting a beautiful day, and because he was expecting a beautiful day, he did not carry his cloak, his raincoat. And then it ends up raining, and so he's talking to the storm, and he's saying that I have been wronged, and your apology is not enough. Sometimes I think that a lot of us many of us have been in that situation where we want to forgive. We are getting an apology, but we think that the apology is not enough for all the pain that we've been through, and that's such a real that's such a real emotion that people through the ages have felt. It's not just people now. And I really like the line that he says that, the offender's sorrow lends but weak relief to him that bears the strong offense's cross. So the one who has been offended, it's a very strong offense. It's a cross, a very strong and heavy cross to bear. So the person who offends, their sorrow and their apology is very weak compared to the pain that the offended person has to bear. And but then what I really like about Shakespeare is that he doesn't pretend to end on a happy note. He goes on to say that that maybe the tears that the offender has shed, now those make it okay. So, it's like addressing the baser version or the baser emotions of humans, that when we see people who have hurt us, when we see them suffer, sometimes we feel good about it, So I like the fact that Shakespeare does not mince his words, and he's being very open about a human emotion that all of us have been through. And yeah, it's something, it's very relatable. So sonnets and Shakespeare's prose can seem very daunting initially, but I think that the kind of messages we get from it can really teach us a lot, as we see from sonnet 34. All right. Also, one more thing that I like about Shakespeare is that he is very versatile. So as this particular poem shows us, it's relevant today, and it was relevant 100 years ago. It was relevant 200 years ago, because he talks about an emotion which is so prevalent, an emotion which is so common and so something that all of us can understand. It remains relevant through the ages and for a lot of people, and people across the ages as well. So that's what I really like about Shakespeare and his poetry. Okay, next I'd like to read something very contemporary. And this is a poem by Sharanya Manivanan. She is the author of 5 books. She's a poetess, a novelist, an essayist, and a columnist. So you can read a lot of her work on her own website. You can read a lot of her work in different publications in India, in Sri Lanka, and in other places as well. She was born in India and grew up in Sri Lanka and Malaysia, and she now lives in Chennai. And so she's written a poem called August the Year After. So it goes something like this. I should be in Sri Lanka now, but I am not. Caught instead inside the throat of a rainstorm in a large village to the north. My grandfather sleeping in the Colombo house with the second to last fifth of my grandmother's ashes. The last house she walked in. When the day breaks, he will leave for Kathirgamam. Daylight in that country shaped like a tear, origin of love, resting place of serendipity. I wake to the bed trembling. Tonight, islands other than my heart are equally seismic. The rain ceases. The fear of water sets in. The coast puckers against it. And my grandmother, she whose remains will bless the flood of 5 rivers, will continue to walk. The sound of her bangles in the hallways of every building I will lay my head in, waking me on nights of rain, as if to say, look, the stars are for you, the lightning for you. Whatever the morning brings, know this. See how much we love you. And I just love the way this poem is written. It's like, the author is talking about her roots. She's talking about how, again, the cyclical nature of everything. She's talking about her death. She's talking about life. She's talking about love. She's talking about death. All in the same poem. We get all of this. And she's talking about, the seismic, how her heart is trembling with the seismic shocks, which is what is outside her as well. So in many poems related to nature, we see this element where the author is saying that whatever is happening out in nature is also happening within them. And I think I really like that, because I think forever man has looked to nature for solutions, for solace, for ideas, for inspiration. And it's really nice to see how that can really come alive in poetry and in words. And so Sri Lanka happens to be one of my favorite countries as well. The last time I visited Sri Lanka, everybody was talking about the tsunami, so people were so close to the natural disaster that had happened, and a lot of them had taken something very positive out of it. So people were not cribbing, people were not criticizing the tsunami. A lot of them were taking it as a message from nature. So I think that Sri Lanka, and especially other countries which are so close to nature, people have like this wisdom, and it all comes from the fact that they live so close to the nature. And the way the writer has written about the water in this poem is how you actually see people in Sri Lanka, and in fact people who live near any water body, they have this intimate relationship with the water. And the last lines, about look at the water, look at the lightning, we all love you. So it's sort of saying that we are at one with nature. We're not at war with nature. We're not against it. So I really like I really like that message that goes out, that nature is for you, and everything in nature is for you, because it loves you, and it is you. So I really like that there's something to learn from nature as well. All right. So moving on is a poem by which I actually found on Instagram, and as soon as I read it on Instagram, I said that I must buy the book, and I downloaded the book as well, and I read it literally in one sitting because it was so beautiful. The words were so beautiful. It's just amazing. One poem after the other is just really beautiful. And so the poem that I'd like to read is called Rain, and it's in a book called Pluck Me and Hum. And I'm just going to open my Kindle and just tell you a little bit about Kazim Ali. So Kazim Ali has worked as a political organizer, lobbyist, and yoga instructor. And no wonder I feel so close to him, and I could actually understand the words that he's written, because I think he has a particular bent of mind. And maybe, as people who are on spiritual pursuits, perhaps we can understand each other and understand each other's words and thoughts. So he's currently on the faculty of Oberlin College, where he teaches in the creative writing and comparative literature departments. His volumes of poetry include The Sky Ward, The Far Mosque, The 40th Day, and the poetic memoir Bright Felon, Autobiography and Cities, which was a finalist for the Ohiona Library Book Award in Poetry, the Lantern Award in Memoir, and the Asian American Literary Award. He has also published novels Queen's Passage, named one of the best books of 2005 by Chronogram, The Disappearance of Seth, and Wind Instrument. He is the author of 3 collections of essays: Orange Alert, Essays on Poetry, Art and the Architecture of Silence, Resident Alien, On Border Crossing and the Undocumented Divine, and Fasting for Ramadan, Notes from a Spiritual Practice. He is the translator of Water's Footfall and Oasis of Now, selected poems, both by Saurabh Seperi, as well as the novel La Amour by Marguerite Duras. He is the founding editor of the small press Nightboat Books, as well as the series editor for the Poets on Poetry series from the University of Michigan Press. So an illustrious, career here, and so much that he does, so much that he indulges in. But you can see, by the kind of titles that he has, that there is a particular mood and a particular kind of topic that he likes to write about. And Rain is no different. It's just beautiful, and I'd really like to share it with you. So it goes. Rain. With thick strokes of ink, the sky fills with rain. Pretending to run for cover, I secretly pray for more rain. Over the echo of the water, I hear a voice saying my name. No one in the city moves under the quick, sightless rain. The pages of my notebook soak, then curl. I've written, yogis opened their mouths for hours to drink the rain. The sky is a bowl of dark water, rinsing your face. The window trembles, liquid glass could shatter into rain. I am a dark bowl waiting to be filled. If I open my mouth now, I could drown in the rain. I hurry home as though someone is there waiting for me. The night collapses into your skin. I am the rain. So I just simply love this. So what I really like is the dark imagery, and how in this particular poem, the writer is just saying that I am nature, I am the rain. Till now, we've seen that nature is reflected in the writer, reflected in the poet, in the mind of the poet. And here, there is a confluence, of the person who's witnessing nature and the person who is experiencing nature and nature itself, which I really like. And I think the larger meaning of this poem is that we are all nature, and there's, again, no point in fighting nature, and we should all endeavor to live with nature. So, and I really like the imagery, like, I am a dark bowl waiting to be filled with thick strokes of ink. The sky fills with rain. It's something that we can actually visualize, and I love vivid imagery. All right, so now we're going to come to the last poem that I have planned for you, and this is going to be my last poem for my last performance for the virtual Kala series. And this one is actually called Before the Flood, and it's also somewhat contemporary. It's a poem by William Stanley Merwin. And William Stanley Merwin was actually an American poet, and he was also a playwright. He also worked as an editor and a translator. And he has an impressive body of work, and he's won numerous awards for the work that he's done. And he died recently. He died in 2019. So you know, a very contemporary writer. And I think the way he's written this poem is reflective of the kind of attitudes that we have towards nature, towards flood. And in this particular poem, we see one of the most famous floods in, you know, in folklore, and in folklore actually mentioned. So the poem goes, Before the Flood. Why did he promise me that we would build ourselves an ark all by ourselves, out and back of the house on New York Avenue in Union City, New Jersey, to the singing of the streetcars after the story of Noah, whom nobody believed about the waters that would rise over everything? When I told my father I wanted us to build an ark of our own there in the backyard, under the kitchen, could we do that? He told me that we could. I want to, I said, and will we? He promised me that we would. Why did he promise then? I wanted us to start then. Nobody will believe us. I said that we are building an ark because the rains are coming. And that was true. Nobody ever believed we would build an ark there. Nobody would believe that the waters were coming. What I really like about this poem is that it speaks a lot about the insecurity of childhood. You know, the poem is about a child who reads about Noah's Ark and gets insecure, and you know, he feels that maybe it's going to happen to him, and he feels that, you know, they should build an ark so that they are safe. You know, the family is safe, and at the same time, he understands that people will laugh at him, just like nobody believed Noah when he said that a flood was coming, that nobody would believe him. But then you also have these elements of betrayal, because he keeps saying, you know, why did he say that we would when we didn't? Why did he lie to me? So it's like the innocence, almost like, you know, the innocence of childhood and the disappointment, you know, of childhood at something that never got built. So all of us have actually been through that, you know, through disappointments in childhood, you know, an adult telling us that we would do something and actually not, you know, heeding to their promise and not keeping their promise. And there's something, you know, for everybody in this particular poem. And I chose it because, like I said, it is, you know, an offshoot, or it is based upon the most famous flood of all time, which is Noah's Ark. So that's it from me for today. I really hope that you've enjoyed the collection of poetry that I've curated for you, not only in this session, but in my previous session as well. Once again, my name is Pragya Bhatt. You can read about me. You can read more of my work on my blog, yogawithpragya.com. You can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on Facebook as well. And please, you know, if you've enjoyed the performance, please do buy my book. It's called Beyond Asanas, and it's available everywhere on Amazon, Flipkart, in your nearest bookstore. And yes, I hope that we do cross paths with each other. I hope, you know, my interpretation of the poems has given you something to think about. And I will see you sometime, whether in a yoga class or another literature reading or a literary event. Thank you for attending.